All right. Welcome to our Flex Breakout session for our Summer Conference 2026. Last summer conference is when we announced the changes to the Flex program, and we've been busy testing all of the features, making sure everything's ready to go. And as of June 1st, when our summer Flex classes started, all of our Flex classes now reflect these updated features, and I'm so excited. There have been a couple of bumps, and we're getting through it, but overall, I feel like it has been a pretty exciting ride and a fun update for all of our students. Today, I'm going to highlight some of the details. I know that you've been working through the Flex-specific just-in-time modules for the last couple of months. Today's going to just kind of brush over those, a chance to ask questions, and also some advice on the implementation of these new features. I was able to be one of the pilot teachers for these classes, and so we've got a little bit of experience on ways to manage some of the changes. All right, so these are the items that we're going to be going through: course structure changes, the knowledge inventory, target due dates, challenge tests, and gradebook displays. And then I'll go through the couple of questions that were submitted through the survey that I sent out a couple weeks ago, and then questions from you guys as well. As we hit different topics, if a question comes to mind, especially for those who are in the midst of it now, who are a week and a half into their class, please go ahead and raise your hand. I know in the large session, they were discouraging you from doing that, but I think we're small enough that we can work through those. So if you've taught Flex before, you know that we used to have 4 modules, but really what they were the 8 units, combining every 2 units into 1 module. We've spread them back out again. So now we have those 8 units instead of our 4 modules. The biggest adjustment for Flex teachers who have taught courses before is modifying those teacher tips pages. Flex only requires 1 teacher tips page per unit. Now, that means that if you have a teacher tips page for module 1, you're going to need to go through and duplicate it and then take out of unit 1 what was part of unit 2 and so forth. So delete what doesn't apply to your unit and get that in there. You've noticed, if you're teaching now, that one of the biggest course setup changes is that your course comes preloaded with 2 teacher tips pages. That is because that is the recommendation for cohort classes, is that they have 1 teacher tips unit or 1 teacher tips page per week of the course. And if your unit spans 2 weeks, you need 2 teacher tips pages. That does not apply to Flex. And so you go in and hide that teacher tips page. This is how that works. So in your teacher resources, the arrow up at the top, teacher resources, one of the items says post your teacher tips, and down here is the note that says you have to hide them, and this IORAD starting at step 15 walks you through what you need to do. Erin D, are you seeing? Oh, never mind. I can do that. Okay, perfect. So this is in that teacher resources course setup document. When we only do it once a semester, it's easy to forget, but it's all right there in that document. So hopefully for those that taught, it was pretty easy to navigate and hide those items. Yes, go ahead. Oh, no, I think that was a... Oh, okay, Erin D, thanks. If you have questions about teacher tips, I would encourage you to go in and attend the session. I think actually that this engagement and accessibility and teacher tips is presented at both of the next 2 breakout sessions after lunch. So, and if you have other places you need to go, you can always watch the recording of the teacher tips advice session. We've been doing teacher tips for a while, so this isn't really new to us. But you never know what you might get from one of these sessions. A little bit more about the course structure changes. End of course deadlines are now 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time or 10:59 p.m. Pacific Time. This is a change. Flex used to be 5 p.m. Mountain Time, 4 p.m. Pacific Time. The thing that is remaining the same is that extension applications are still due by 5 p.m. in the SIS. If a student misses that deadline, then the way that the extension has to be approved is through that site coordinator. They would need to contact their site coordinator, who would reach out to IDLA and work through the extension process that way. So that's something that's a little bit different. And this comes from input and feedback from site coordinators about that 5 p.m. deadline being moved out to an 11:59 deadline. Another major course structure change with this update is that as of fall of 2026, we will not be doing flex rollovers anymore. Only 2-week extensions or 5-week hardship extensions. During this summer, we're addressing rollover requests on a case-by-case basis, and the regional coordinators are going to be working really closely with school districts to determine which students need those rollovers until that new policy takes effect. This is a lot of the justification behind this comes from the changes to the budget based on the legislative session. So that'll be interesting. No more will you have those students that come in with 75% of the class done. They'll be coming in from scratch. All right. Yes, thanks, Cass, for taking care of the chat questions. Any questions regarding course structure before we move on to the next item on the agenda? Teresa, help me understand. You can go ahead and unmute if you want to. Any discussion extensions offered after 75%?
Yeah, right now they have to be 50%. And I'm just curious because, I had a couple of kids on extensions who are at 50% and then they don't finish. And I just feel like 50% of the class in 2 weeks is too much.
Right. So that policy is not changed. We are still at extensions at 50% for that requirement. And the board is approving the updated handbook and guidelines soon. So it won't be happening for at least another year, but that's something that we can discuss in committee going forward.
I just wonder, does anybody else ever have that concern, or is it just me?
I will be honest, I had a student at like 52% this last semester, and she got it all the way done. So I think it's on a case-by-case situation.
Very sure.
I had some students finish also, but I'm almost 100% positive it was completely done AI.
We will talk about that at the end of the session. Kayla, one of your, how flexible, right.
I teach Algebra 1B mainly. And so I have so many students in a semester that are dual enrolled in A and B. And it's very frustrating. I don't know how flexible I should be with that start date, because I try and be flexible with I want you to start by the midterm. And then I have students that aren't even halfway done with 1A by the midterm.
So I'm excited for you to experiment with that this summer. Work closely with the 1A teacher. Encourage those students to set their 1A target due date.
Yeah, I sent an email to my students that are in 1A. Please adjust your deadline to this date.
Yes. And then their grades will be more realistic based on where they really should be. But yes, as the 1B teacher, we would encourage not to have inactivity drops until that halfway point. And you can be very clear with your student. Starting on this date, we'll be
Okay.
making that change. All right, we've got some hands. Cass, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify with the change to the flex program that the extension qualifications do adjust as well. So in the past, it was you had to be 50% complete with the course. Now that we have the due dates and the automatic zeros going in, the extension qualifications are the same as cohort. So they have to, instead of 50% complete with the course, they have to have a 50% overall grade. So it's just, it sounds the same, but it is an important distinction that the student's grade has to be higher than a 50%. So technically they could be 75% complete with the course, but below a 50% in what they have earned. So I think it's important that we just touch on that real quick, that they, with those automated zeros, their overall grade at the time of that end of course date needs to be above a 50%. I think that might change where kids land in this approval of extension as well, as we try to make a more have their progress reports clarify a little bit better where they actually stand and get away from that gradable completion. So just wanted to take a moment with that.
Thank you. Yes, and then Misha, to answer your question, I think Bobby talked about it. You can display gradable completion percentages still in the gradebook, even though it's not really a factor forward facing to the students and parents. So I also make that change in my personal gradebook so that I can see them when I'm looking at students. Fantastic. All right. Now let's jump in. The next thing that is new in our flex classes are the knowledge inventories. These have been used for a long time in cohort classes as the pre-test and post-test score for the final grade report. Now that we have them in Flex 2, so there's no more guessing about, well, what should I be using for that final grade report? And also, it automatically loads into the grade report, so there's no more manual entry. So that is a huge change in the program that I am really excited about. Yeah, they auto upload. It's great. I love it. So that's pretty straightforward. The next big change is our target due dates. I do want to make it really clear that these are not static. So here's the situation I encountered this last semester. I submitted a progress report. The student's grade was below a 70%. She came onto my list for phone calls for the action requests. And when I went to start making the phone call, suddenly she had a 75%. And I looked at the activity and she hadn't done anything since submitting the progress report. What had happened is that the student set an earlier target end date. For example, she joined the class on September 1st, set October 1st as the target end date. And then target due dates got automatically assigned. Then she didn't do anything. So zeros got assigned. She went in and pushed her target due date out to November 1st. It redistributed the target due dates and removed zeros for work that was no longer past due. And now her grade was different. So I just want to give you that heads up. If you notice something like that in your class, it took me a little bit of digging to figure out what had happened there. So it is possible to submit progress reports on Tuesday, have a student flagged for a phone call, and by the time you get there, they no longer qualify for that phone call, but it's still a good idea to check in with the student. I have loved the target due dates and the automatic zeros. It really does give parents and students a more realistic picture of where they are in the class. And I hope that all of my summer teachers are enjoying that as well. Elizabeth, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just starting the new version of this, and I'm seeing that some of them are just putting in target, like overall target due dates and not necessarily individual assignment target due dates. They need to put in individual target due dates, correct?
No, nope. The input that comes from students, the students get input on two items. The first is when they want their course to end. And the second is what days of the week they want assignments due. With those two pieces of input, the system automatically assigns the rest of those target due dates.
Okay, cool. So then if they don't match those, then it gives them a 0.
Correct.
Okay, so there's nothing that we really have to do.
Exactly. Yep. And I know. And it's very individualized. So the student can take responsibility for it. In Kayla's case, where she's the B class and the a student has both, they just set that A deadline for halfway through the summer, and it hopefully keeps them a little bit more on track. Teresa, go ahead.
Patrick Wilson.
I just wanted to comment to the teacher that's doing the B class. I do both A and B for the same course in the summer, and I tell the E students that they need to be done by the first week of July, but also I let them know just so that they kind of stay active in their B class, that when you get through, say, the first 2 units, you can probably go in and do, I haven't quite connected the dots on the new rework, but it was this way in the past. They could go do a couple of assignments in the B class just to kind of show that they're involved and active. I have that conversation on my phone calls. Get a few units done in A and then go see what you can get done in B, just so they're active in both a little bit. But yes, those zeros are still going to show up, and I let them know that as well. But if they can be done by the first week of July, they can certainly overcome those.
Fantastic. Yep. All right. So target due dates are a fantastic addition. I'm really excited about that change. Another item there. Oh, we have one more question. Kim, go ahead.
Sorry, Lisa, I just wanted to remind teachers too that if the student doesn't do their own target due dates, the system automatically gives them target due dates. So if they skip that assignment, they're still going to get zeros.
That is true. They don't, and in fact, they will get a 0 for the target due date assignment if they don't submit it. But the target due dates will be auto-assigned at some point early on in the class. Thanks for that clarification. All right, challenge tests. Challenge tests are brand new for us. There are 2 places that students and us as teachers can go to learn about them. And both of them are in that Start Here folder. So the first item is kind of the 1-page summary, and the second item gives more details, kind of a breakdown of the process. So I would encourage you to read through that. If you have questions, that's where I go. If a student asks me a question, is I go back and review those 2 locations in the course. Let's talk about what this is going to look like. So here's what the gradebook looks like after a successful challenge test. You'll notice that all of the assignments for that unit are exempted, and the score for the challenge test gets manually entered in as the unit test score. Now, I'll tell you that during my spring semester, I had 44 students. I only had 4 students that attempted a challenge test, and amongst those, there were really only 5 attempts. So I had 1 student who attempted 2 challenges, and then the other 3 students that just did 1 challenge. 4 of the 5 were successful, and 1 was not. So this is not something that you're going to get on a regular basis. I mean, the percent is pretty low, because we have 8 units. And in my particular class, all of the units could be challenged. So not a ton of people took me up on this. Bobby said probably very few during the summer. And that's true, especially with the challenge of them being proctored. One important thing is that this proctoring is not supposed, based on what I've seen in the documentation, this is not supposed to be passed along to a parent to take care of the proctoring. There are resources for the summer. If there is a student that really wants to challenge, they're encouraged to first reach out to their site coordinator. And then if they can't reach their site coordinator during the summer, to reach out to the regional support specialist. Shay, go ahead.
Well, this kind of brings up a question about proctoring, because like I had a student who completed a test at 2 a.m. And so I had the question then about how was this test proctored? And so I just kind of want to check, reaching out to the site coordinator and saying, hey, this is the situation. I'd like to better understand that. Because I know some schools will allow it to go to parents, others don't. Turned out that this student had actually, it was their second attempt on a proctored one, and somehow it remained unlocked. And so had somehow gotten the password a second time, or it stayed unlocked. And so with those situations, like letting the site coordinator know is really helpful. But it seemed like it may also need to be a larger policy, because yeah, just kind of an issue. So is there any additional suggestions that you would have for dealing with a situation like that?
You did exactly what I would recommend. If you have a test that you question the validity of the proctoring, reach out to the site coordinator. So anytime I see a proctored test that has come in over the weekend or at 2 o'clock in the morning or anything like that, reach out. Now, site coordinators are allowed to give test passwords to other people to serve as proctors, and some of those can be parents. There are students who are physically unable to go into the school and their parent gets to serve as their proctor. But I believe that for our challenge tests, that should be few and far between. There will always be the exceptions where we need to make it work for a student, but the challenge test should be proctored by site coordinators.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but site coordinator is always your first line if you have questions. Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious if anyone else is having problems with students that are taking the proctored tests with coming up with the exact same answers that they did in the unit tests and the quizzes before that, where it's obviously they're just cutting and pasting right from those previous tests. And I'm wondering what kind of, I don't know, how closely these proctored tests are being monitored. I guess I'm having a problem with that.
Yeah, so that isn't a question that is universal. That is a case by case. Every school does it differently. And again, that would be a chance to reach out to that site coordinator and ask a few clarifying questions about what environment it looks like at their school. Yeah, that's my best advice for you there. All right, these are all really good questions. Now, challenge tests are assigned due dates near the end of the whole course. So students get stressed out when a challenge test gets marked as 0, which happens after that target due dates pass. But because all of the assigned due dates are at the end of the course, it usually doesn't become an issue. However, sometimes students will get there and then they'll be like, oh, I have more tests to take. And then they'll go and take all these challenge tests. So I would suggest that occasionally you go in and you filter the grade book to only show challenge tests. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. Sort it by the gradable percent complete if you've turned that on, and then mark the challenge tests that the students have already passed as exempt. That way they don't get a little bit confused. So once a student is started into Unit 2, their Unit 2 challenge test can be flagged as exempt. So you can see here on the board, this button up here. Oh, sorry, there we go. This button here is the filter button. And then you can filter by just challenge tests so that that's all that's shown on the screen. And then once you've done that, you can sort this by gradable percent complete. So you can see where kids are. I'm a math teacher, and so I broke down these percentages. By 12.5%, students will be nearing the end of Unit 1, by 25, nearing the end of 2, right? So if I have a student that is like this student right here, 15% complete, that means that they are likely starting into Unit 2 already. They finished Unit 1, they're working on Unit 2. And so I'm going to go ahead and mark the Unit 2 challenge test as exempt. Now, these percentages are not exact in every course, but this just lets the students know, oh, I don't have to do this, or at that point, they shouldn't do it, and prevents that panic of, oh, I have a 0 on this and I have to take it. Any questions on that? And if you do need help figuring out these settings, I'm more than happy to do that. You have to activate the gradable percent complete in your class. And then you would have to initiate that filter and then clear off the filter when you're done. Elizabeth, go ahead.
How often do you check that? Like, I check mine every week, but are you checking more often on that gradable percent to turn that off?
There is no rule on this. I think the most important thing is to just establish your own pattern. If you want to do this every time you submit a progress report, or maybe on the off weeks, I mean, whatever fits your workflow the best is just fine.
But I'm curious how often you did it, just because you've tried this before. So not by any means that all kids are going to be this way and that everyone needs to do it this way.
Right. I was doing mine in conjunction with progress reports. And that was just, I was already in there, and I scheduled out a chunk of time to make sure my reports were accurate. So that was my workflow. That was what worked for me, but it's not the rule. All right. So challenge tests were fun. I didn't find them utilized very often, and I suspect it'll be the same in most of your classes. The last item on the agenda, and then we have a couple of questions from the survey, is our gradebook displays. In our new Flex courses, the students' grades are going to be displayed as points, not percentages. Now, this is what's forward-facing to the parents and the students. You as a teacher, this is what it will look like to students. So you can see 13 out of 13, 10.75 out of 13. There's no more percents here. Low scores do still get flagged as red. If you don't like this view, the reason why we've done this is so that students have an idea as to where their time is better spent. This is not a great example because most of the scores are decent. But if I have 2 grades that are 25%, and one is that they got 2 out of 8 points, and one is that they got something out of a much higher point assignment, it helps students to know where to focus. But on the class-wide screen, you still have control over your grades, over what you want that to look like. So what do? If you go into the gradebook settings, you can change how the score displays. If you click on show me what the student sees, then you'll be seeing points. If you click on percent, then you'll be seeing percent. If you choose this, what the student sees, then I would recommend that you also go into this visible footers area and click points, because what that will do is along the bottom of your gradebook, it will tell you how many points the assignment was worth. So in the gradebook itself, well, let's see. Yeah, so here in the gradebook, you see the points, but then at the bottom, you see what the the assignment was worth. So your grade book is up to you how you want to manage that. But if you choose to show what the student sees, I would recommend turning on that footer. Shay, go ahead and ask your question.
Weighted grades. So tests are usually weighted heavier. And I've had a lot of students get very confused about the point aspect. Because like, hey, that test should only count for 100 points in the overall scheme. Are they seeing how things are weighted in their grades, or are we going to continue with that confusion?
That's a really good question. Kim, are you still in here? Do you want to talk about the weighting of the grade book? I'm not sure if she's still here.
She still has a square.
Oh, sorry, I'm still here. Sorry. So what we learned when we started working with Buzz is that when we had them in grading categories before with the flex, like the discussion boards, we're at 20%. I can't even remember. It's been so long. But everything was weighted the same in the grading category. So math teachers, your course points are pretty much close to the same. But when you're talking an English paper where they had to write throughout the unit, they had to write and it was building, it didn't matter if that was a 20-point assignment or a 100-point assignment, it was being weighted the same. So this is why we went to points, and both of our other programs, cohort and credit recovery, use points. So we decided to have them all match. And that's part of the reason, well, a lot of the reason why that happened. Does that make sense? And sorry, I'm headed to an appointment, so I'm sorry if there was some background noise.
Thanks, Kim.
Yes and no. Okay, so as an example, a student does 10 10-point assignments compared to their 100-point test. Okay, and so in that, if points are all being not weighted, then each of those points, one question in their assignment compared to a 10-point question in their test, right? That test question is definitely worth 10 times what that is. So it's a point clarity all the way across, correct?
Right, but we now still have grading categories. So the tests are in their own grading categories. So your unit tests are in their own gradable grading categories. So they're weighted 20, is it 20? Oh gosh, Lisa, I just forgot.
I think it is 20.
20, and then all the coursework is the 80%. So that matches what a final is in cohort.
Okay, so we will still have that confusion where they work to add up all of the points thinking that they're all the same weight to them. And so that's just something I think we as instructors need to bring up. Usually I do that on the case by case because people say, what if I don't do anything? Do I still pass the class? There's a wonderful what if calculator that they don't like to use. But we need to just say, hey, this much is worth that much. So you have to essentially teach them the math problem to calculate their grade. And they'll do way more of that to calculate their grade than the actual math homework that you assign.
Yep. Thanks, Shay. Thanks, Kim. Cass, go ahead.
Yeah, just to jump in on that, because what I think is important about what Kim just said is the weights as we see them now in the new Flex program are much more transparent to the point value of the assignments. So if you look back at the old Flex program when you had the proctored tests, the discussions, and those items that were worth 60%. And so you had those kids that didn't finish one or two of those, and then they put those zeros in at the end and you'd see that catastrophic grade drop. That's no more. That's gone. That 60% huge weight of like 4 or 6 assignments is gone, okay? What we see now is that 80% of the course is weighted just coursework, which means all the coursework is at its point value. And then 20% are the 2 proctored exams or the 2 proctored unit tests. So they are those 2 proctored unit tests weighted a little bit more heavily so that it is more comparable to the weight of the comprehensive final in your cohort classes, which is also 20% of the grade. But everything else within that category of coursework, that 80%, everything is its point value. So we are not going to have those catastrophic drops because a kid didn't complete one assignment that looks like it's 20 points, but with that 60% weight, it just was devastating to them. This is much more transparency. Yes, I still think the what if calculator is an incredible tool for them to use if they're going to skip an assignment or two. But really, it's that point value and them seeing the points. It's going to allow them to know exactly what they're going to miss and exactly how much their grade will drop. And again, they have to complete those 2 proctored unit tests for course completion.
Just want to point out in the chat, it actually for Flex is 40 and 60. So the assessments are 40%, coursework is 60%, but it does follow more the same pattern of the assessments are in their own category.
Okay. Yes, but we're maintaining the rule from the most recent Flex program that proctored tests are required in order to earn credit. So they must complete those. Okay, gradebook displays. There was another question earlier in the chat. Where do you go to those gradebook settings? So when you're in your gradebook, you're just going to come up here and click on this gears button at the top. Karma asked, do you have to pass them? No, they do not. They just have to give an attempt. They have to try. If they skip the test, they don't get credit. The gear is where you open up the gradebook settings, and that's where you'll find the place where you can toggle between points and percents, add the footer of how many points it's worth if you are displaying points. But just know that what you change in your gradebook doesn't change what the students see. The students are going to still see this point value. The last thing that I want to show is that we have support hours. So if you feel like you are needing a little bit of extra help, you're always welcome to reach out to me. The sessions that have Flex specific knowledge are the ones on Tuesday evening, Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday, and Thursday. Elizabeth and Kendra on the Monday and Tuesday mornings probably have enough knowledge, but also have us to reach out to if they have, if they need to. So feel free to visit us if you need to, or if you need help outside of those hours, I'm more than happy to help. You should have all my contact information from things that I've sent out in the past. And 2 questions that came in through the survey was one about AI use. There is no magic answer to this. The key that we are asking all of our teachers to do is just to look back in the academic honesty policy and work through the process that is there. Work with the site coordinator to find what you want to do there. The other class, or the other question that was proffered, Elizabeth, is this about the AI stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you want to finish though? I can wait.
No, go ahead. There was the next question was not AI based. So.
Oh, okay. So what are we doing? Like, I love that we actually allow them to use AI because I feel like that gives them some like, oh, I get to use this now kind of thing. What are we doing with schools? Like my face-to-face class school does not allow, like we don't have Grammarly, we don't have hardly anything other than Google that allows AI. So what accommodations are we making for that?
Okay, so that's a great question. The Busy Bee stuff that has been talked about is not actually in Flex classes at this point. Every cohort class has a Busy Bee, but in the teacher resources, there are alternative assignments for schools that do not allow the AI use. So it's already built in. It's there for you to use when that need arises. And if and when Busy Bee comes into flex classes, we'll have access to that same resource. Things have already been created to take care of that. Kim, go ahead.
Sorry, and if I'm correct, there shouldn't be any assignments that are saying that they can use AI unless we've provided a Busy Bee. And Lisa, just clarify that for me, because the other Lisa, sorry, Lisa Cable, project lead on this. But it should be AI levels 1 through 3, correct, Lisa?
So AI levels 1 through 3, yeah. So AI level 1 and 2 allow the use of AI. We do not have Busy Bees created for those 2 levels. So students are allowed to use whatever AI tool they want if they have access to it, but the AI is not required at any of those levels. So students who don't have access just won't use AI, and that will be fine. They can complete the assignments like they always have.
That's what I saw in there, was that 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
It allowed for that. I didn't see any Busy Bee stuff, but yeah, I just didn't know what the procedure was for that, but I'm glad you guys had pre-thought of that.
Teresa, to answer your question, the way that I handle that in my class is when I see an obvious copy and paste, I contact the student and I talk to them about, I'm really glad that you're finding resources to help you, but there's an appropriate way to use this resource and an inappropriate way. Copying and pasting without thinking through it is an inappropriate way. The right way to be using these resources is to see the solution, walk through it yourself, make sure it makes sense, and then create your own answer in your own words on the assignment. Every teacher is going to handle this differently, but always just refer back to that academic honesty policy. Okay, yeah, there's a lot of great ideas of what to use, like directions you could go in the chat. So that's great. I'm glad you have those conversations. The other question that got submitted through the survey was about orientations. You should be aware that even though a student has already completed a flex class, meaning they already had a flex orientation, because of the updates to our courses, there is a new flex orientation class that students need to be taking. So if they are in your class, ideally they've already gone through that new flex orientation course, but it's been a little confusing for a couple of students who have already taken a flex class and think that they don't have to take this orientation class. So this is an issue that's more being dealt with on the registrar level, but you might get some of those types of questions in your classes as students are not adding in and not understanding why they're not in yet. So, all right, that's it. We can continue that conversation about AI over in the chat. We've got about 2 minutes before we have our lunch break. So I will stick around for any questions that people would like to ask. And otherwise, enjoy your lunch. Maybe you can go find some of that carnival food. Yes, Brian, send those questions my way. You're welcome to call me, text me, email me. I am happy to be a resource all summer long and in the fall. All right, happy lunch to everybody. I'll stick around for a couple minutes.